YouTube, this is White One Auto checking in back again today for part 2 of our $10,000 parts budget LS swap. This is for my 1970 Chevelle. It sits back over there in the corner right there, and that frame is not for my car. That's for another car. But this is our engine. So remember, this is a Escalade engine that essentially we got for free because we purchased a wrecked 2008 Escalade, I believe it was. It was a 2008 or 7 for $2,500. And then we were able to sell a lot of parts off of it. And now we have a free engine. So our budget is still pretty much at zero, aside from the parts that we have already bought. But once we install them, then we will start subtracting from our budget. But the goal today is to get the engine torn down, to get the exhaust manifolds off, the torque converter, and yes, normally I would not pull an engine out with a torque converter still attached, but this truck was wrecked and we didn't care about it, so that is the exception. So we're gonna get the exhaust manifolds off, the torque converter, the front accessories. Let's try to get a better picture of those. All of our front accessories off. We still got some engine mounts on here. Get all of this stuff off so that we can get it mounted on our engine stand and start tearing the engine down. So let's go ahead and start doing that. First, we'll get our motor mount brackets off and our engine mount. This is our driver's side engine mount. That's removed. Our engine mount fell down in our tire, so we'll pull that off after we get the engine up in the air. That's not working. So this is our old engine mount. That was the passenger side. So now we'll work on, we'll pull our AC compressor off and then get our starter off. So I believe, because there's a bolt hidden behind the bracket on this compressor, so you have to pull the compressor off and then you can get to that bolt. This is that bolt I was talking about. So you're gonna grab this knock sensor off. Starter bolts should be 13s. Now, because starter bolts are different than most bolts, I will keep the starter bolts inside the starter so I'll know exactly what those are. So next, you gotta grab our little dust shield off. So this is our dust shield here, so we're gonna grab that off. Then now we can get out our torque converter bolts. I'll grab a socket to turn the crank, and you can line it up exactly where we want. See if we can bring you guys in a little bit better in focus. There. So that works out pretty good. So there's a lot of moving around, but I want you guys to be able to see. So this is our torque converter bolt. So we pull that out, and then that is what is holding our torque converter on. So be mindful that as you pull these bolts out, when you get that last bolt out, that thing will just want to fall off. So be mindful about that. So we put a socket on our balancer so we can turn it, and then we'll get our torque converter bolts out. I don't know if my long extension on this impact will have enough balls to get it off. Let's see. So it did. That is good. And what we're using today is a Makita, like an M12 with a 4 amp hour battery, and we have it set on number 3. And what we are using today for our 3/8 impact is a Milwaukee M12 with a 4 amp hour battery. I am personally a Snap-on fanboy. I love Snap-on tools, but the Milwaukee impacts I like a little bit better. I have like 2 3/8 Snap-on impacts. They work great, but this one puts out a little bit more torque, I personally believe. So this is our last one. I believe it's only 3 in here. So we're gonna loosen this up. I can already see my torque converter sliding off. So we're gonna loosen it. I had it all the way out of there. But I didn't. So we'll set the hub back in there. So now our torque converter is off. And next we will move on to the front accessories. So next we'll pull our water pump off. Now, what you see right here is the bane of every 6062 owner, the displacement on demand. Unfortunately, still, even in the new trucks, this is still a problem. So we are gonna delete this. This is one of the reasons why we're tearing this thing down, so we can get this cam out of here, those lifters out of here, and replace them with new aftermarket components. So next we'll get our balancer off, and we're gonna see how our Milwaukee M12 impact does on this thing. So we got a short 24. We'll see how this thing works. And I'm pleasantly surprised. It did pull it off. That's cool. We will grab our harmonic balancer puller and get that thing off. So now I'm gonna give you another one of those moments as the old parents, do what I tell you to do, not what you see me do. And we know those didn't work out either, so. So this is our harmonic balancer plug. You're not supposed to use an impact on this, but I am going to. But what I normally do is before I put this screw in, I put a little bit of ARP, like torque lube on there. I think it helps it out. That's just my personal opinion, and that is what I will do. Pretty much know this is the one because it's bent a little bit. So I use it more than the rest. So there's some little flats up in here to where this will grab. So you just want to get that on those and you will be all good. To me. So we're going to take our Milwaukee 3/8 impact. And that got us home. So next, we're gonna get our coil packs off. So these are our coil packs. These got 10mm bolts on them. So this is our front steam port. Just need to reposition the clamp, I think. So now we're pretty much to the point where we can get it on the engine stand, but I do want to pull the flex plate off as well. That is all. Okay, so now we're at the point where we need to bolt our engine to the head of our engine stand. This is something that I want to talk about because in the past, I've seen this happen a few times. So this is an LS engine. Just because this bell housing pattern will allow you to put a traditional small block Chevy on there, one thing you need to remember is these threads inside of this block are not standard. This takes a metric bolt, a 10 by 1.5 bolt to be exact. That is what you need to put in here. On 4 different occasions, I've had cars come into my shop where somebody else's LS swapped them, and I've had to fix things, and I've noticed that the bell housing bolts that they forced to go in here were the bell housing bolts from their small block Chevy, because they kept their same transmission and just bolted the LS in. So for whatever reason, they assumed that they used those same bolts, and that is very incorrect. Another thing I want to point out to you is that this is a blind hole. This is an open hole here where it goes straight through. Like you can see straight through there. But this is a blind hole. This is a blind hole. This is a blind hole through. A blind hole as well. So this thing does not go straight through. So when you're using your engine stand to the bolts that you are using for your engine stand, you need to be mindful of how long that bolt is going to be, because if it's too long, what'll happen, I've seen this happen a few times, especially on aluminum blocks, like LS2s and LS3s, they will stick a super long bolt through here, and what happens is it'll punch through right here and break this off. Now, that isn't the end of the world, but it is a problem. So now you have to fix that, and now if you're not tearing down your motor, you put a bunch of metal, of cast aluminum debris through your engine. So that's why it's an issue. So what you want to do is you want to take your bolt that you are going to use for your engine stand and stick it through. Now the proper way would be to get your caliper and measure this, measure how deep the threads are, and then you know exactly how long the bolt has to be. But not everybody is going to do that. So I'm going to show you a simple way. So you see how much thread is sticking out on this bolt after it comes through here. And that is with no washer. So we are going to use a washer on it because you always need to have a washer on a bolt, unless it's built into it. So we would take like a washer, stick it on the bolt, and now stick it back through. So this is how much we have that will go into the block. Now, if you're not gonna measure, you can then take this and simply screw it into your block and see where it stops. And we're just turning this by hand, no tools. So you see where it stops. So you know that the threads that now stick out of your engine stand, you know how long they are. And you know how much thread sticks out. So now you need to take up that space with a washer, with some washers in this case, because you don't want it to bottom out inside the block and damage this. And also, you would want to take some compressed air and just blow out these holes before you put your screws in, before you put your bolts in there. So I know where we need to be. So I'm gonna set up my bolts, and then we will get the head pushed on and everything will be okay. So we talked about the bolt holes and the length of the bolts. So we got that down. Now, another thing I want to talk about is where you're going to pick this up at. Because typically on a small block Chevy, they have another hole right here, and you would do one arm here, one there, and one there. So since you're missing this hole here because this is an LS, so where do you pick it up? So what I normally do is I'll pick up here, here, and here. And that normally keeps them pretty steady. So we're gonna do one here, one there, one here, and one there. So once I get this on, you will see it. I'm gonna blow these holes out, and then we will get that done. Another thing I wanna point out, you see this right here. This is your dowel pin. You see right here, there is no dowel pin. This is something that you really need to be mindful of. Even though if you have all these bolts in, without this dowel pin being in, this thing is not centered correctly. And a lot of times when you get an engine from a scrapyard or a junkyard or from somebody that's stripping down a truck, these dowel pins are missing, like one of them's in or none of them are in, or they could possibly be damaged. You want to make sure you have 2 dowel pins in to locate your transmission correctly. Because if you're lucky, probably the worst thing will happen is you will crack your flex plate. And then it's just a matter of pulling the trans back out and throwing a new flex plate on there. In a worst case scenario, you could crack your transmission case. So remember, you need dowel pins. So we will replace this dowel pin because that got stuck in the transmission, because as you remember, like I say, this truck was hit and we just pulled the engine out and the torque converter was still attached to it, and that's not the correct way to do it, but that was the way that it had to be done on this one due to the accident damage. So we lost a dowel pin in that operation, so we need to get a new dowel pin and replace that. So let me get this head here bolted on, and if you see how you have these that are straight and this one that is up, like at an angle. So I'm gonna fix this to the engine like this, with my straight holes at the bottom and my angled ones up there, so I can reach that bolt hole and this bolt hole. And I will get that done and come right back to you. Okay, so right now I'm off the phone and we're on the GoPro. So the goal right now is I'm gonna pull this lift plate off, and then we will add a valley cover and an intake manifold, so when I clean the engine, we can keep as much debris out as possible. So let's do that. So I believe this is the valley cover off of this engine, but it'll work either way because it is a Gen 4 valley cover. You know that by doesn't have the knockout for the cam sensor. And the oil pressure sensor is built into the valley cover, not on the block. So we'll just snug this down. Now we'll grab our intake. PCV. That's what I was worried about. So we have our intake back on, exhaust manifold still on. I think we still got all the spark plugs in here. No, we're missing a couple of spark plugs. So we'll throw some plugs in here. And then, how many plugs do we need? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we need 4 spark plugs. We'll grab some old spark plugs and throw them in there. So we just got some dummy plugs that are the correct style that you can put in here. So we got everything all sealed up. I have block off plates for the water pump, but I'm not concerned about that. And I don't have a balancer on, but I'm not concerned about that either because we're still taking the oil pan off. So right now I'm just doing this to try to protect the cylinders themselves from getting a lot of water down there. Because we are changing this front cover, the cylinder heads, the oil pan, the valley cover, all of this stuff will get changed. But I just want to get a lot of this crud off. So we will stop for right here. I'll shoot some engine degreaser on it and get the... Hey, so I just want to shoot a quick video before we clean up these two engines. So this is a 6.2 out of an Escalade. This is for my Chevelle. We got to get this thing cleaned up. And this is a very nasty 5.3 out of a Silverado that I bought a two-wheel drive Silverado for a swap. But as you can see, the outside appearance, both of them are pretty much like the same size. Like on the outside, they're the same. So the ways you can always tell is by looking on the block itself and looking at the casting numbers will give you a good hint. So that's a 862 head, so you know it's a cathedral port. And this is a 823, so you know that's a square port. So those are just some of the quick tips you can look at. So we're gonna spray these down with some engine degreaser and get them all cleaned up, and then keep moving forward. So here we go. So we got both of the LS style engines fairly cleaned up. Like I say, this one's a 4.8 5.3. It's a 5.3. This one is a 6.2. You can also find them on the back here. See, 4.8 5.3, 6.2, and then another version, as you can see. This here is an iron block 6.0. So this thing here, I gotta tear down and get the crank and the rest of the stuff off of this block so I can get it checked out. And if it checks out good, we're gonna turn this thing into a 408 stroker. So they're like, I guess two major versions of LS, well three, there we go. I don't have an aluminum 5.3, or I believe, yeah, they do have an aluminum 602. I don't have an LS7 block here, or a aluminum 5.7 block. So that would be what we are missing as far as LS blocks. I do actually have an aluminum 5.7 and an aluminum 5.3. They're just in my storage side. I'm not going to grab it. But probably as we update the process of these three engines, we should see them kind of all grouped together maybe at some point. Well, probably not this 6.0, because it's gonna go to the machine shop and it'll probably be there for a little while because it's machine shops are just backed up right now. So that's that. So let me get a start on getting the rest of the stuff off this block so I can get it dropped off hopefully today and keep it moving forward. So we got all our components loaded up for our 408. We got our Cali's Comstar crank, our diamond dish pistons, some eagle rods, and the block. Take this intake back off. We're gonna remove the exhaust manifolds. We got all of the bolts still in there. I should have sauced them up with the secret sauce, but we didn't, so we'll see how it works out. So we're gonna get our exhaust manifolds off, pull this intake back off, get our front cover off, and snatch the valve covers off to see how everything looks on the inside. So let me do that, and I'm gonna check right back in with you. So what I did is I set the GoPro up because I was getting these exhaust manifold bolts out, and I wanted to show you what technique I am using because I believe they will come out real good like this because none of the exhaust manifold bolts are broken off. So what I do is, you can see we got two of them already loose out. This one and this one right here. They came out without breaking and without any sauce. They look like they have been replaced before, because this isn't a regular GM bolt. So that's another thing that makes me think that they will come out easy. So I'm gonna try to get focused in. So what I'm using is, I'm using my snap-on impact driver. Let me see if we can get this thing to focus up some. But that's what it is. So I'm gonna put that on the head of the bolt, then grab a small hammer, get it to turn a couple times. Then I'm gonna take my Milwaukee 3/8 impact, and it comes right out. So that is what we are doing. So I'm gonna go around and smack all of these with a bigger hammer so we can speed this up, son. So that one's turning real good. Whoa. So one side accomplished. Now let's move on to the other side. See, we got a couple of these loose out already. This one is loose, and I'm gonna try to get you closer. Do you see how you got this soot around here? That's because this one was leaking. So, I believe we did this one. We probably did. Put you guys back a little bit. That one broke. So I'm gonna get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 11 out of 6 came off fine. It's not bad odds. This one might not have broke. Well, it probably broke because it was getting a lot of weight from this side by that one being loose or whatever. But I just kind of wanted to videotape that so you could see it. So we're gonna grab our intake off and our front cover. Folds off, and add that to our pile of junk there. So we have our front cover off. The cover is down there in our trash parts because we're not gonna reuse this cover because we are not using a displacement on demand camshaft. We are putting an upgrade camshaft in here. So our oil pan is now off. Now we just got to remove this pickup and the windage tray so we can see what our bottom end looks like. So we have all the nuts out of our windage tray. Our pickup tube is removed. So let's pull this off and see how the bottom end looks. So this is our bottom end of our 6.2. Feel relatively good. Now you see how here this doesn't really have much. It's gonna have some side to side clearance, but these feel all right. So, but I can show you what bad feels like. Or sounds like, should I say. So this is bad. That is bad. That is a rod knocker. So if you need to see the difference between bad and good, I just showed it to you right there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna roll this thing back over and we are going to take the valve covers off to see how the valve springs and everything look. So I'll check right back in. So we got our valve cover bolts loose. Let's pop this valve cover off. And we are reusing the valve covers. So it's definitely a replacement gap. I hit the wrong button while I was shooting. So the L92 heads use an offset rocker arm. You see how this one is offset and how this one is regular? So that is important. You have to use your offset rocker arm on your intake. This is your intake, this is your exhaust. Intake takes the offset. So let's check out our other side. Same thing. So we have no broken valve springs, it doesn't look like, because that's pretty common for these 6.2s to break a valve spring. So that looks good. So that's a real good sign. So let me pause for one moment. So our 6.2 is all torn down. This is a real good starting point for us. I just want to give a quick overview. These are all the parts that we took off of the engine that we are not going to use. Everything from the intake to the exhaust manifolds. Let me talk about the intake. If you're not going to reuse the intake, I would say you can definitely reuse the injectors and possibly the throttle body, depending upon which intake you are going to use. But we're not using the oil pan, the water pump, this AC compressor, definitely not this torque converter, not the exhaust manifolds, not this front cover because it has that DOD, the displacement on demand camshaft in it. Also that oil pump needs to come off too. That windage tray and that pickup are not being used either. But what we are going to use is the valve covers, most likely. We'll rebuild the starter and some of the various bolts. That bracket for the AC compressor is just holding some of the bolts. So now you see why this thing is gonna add up in cost really, really quick, because we are changing a lot on the exterior, as well as we are gonna change a bunch of things on the interior. And yeah, I shouldn't say interior of the engine, but internally on the engine, we are gonna change a few things. So this here will wrap up our 6.2 LS teardown for my 1970 Chevelle. I know it's been a long time since I posted a video about this car, but we're gonna get the ball rolling. So that's where we're at. We'll close this out. Continue to stay tuned for the LS swap $10,000 Chevelle build budget. Thank you.